What's up, everybody? Thanks for being with us. You have found the Slate here on the DraftKings YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter pages. Of course, it's a Friday, which means we're getting you ready for the NFL weekend. Adam Kaufman, Steve Buchanan, Matt LaMarca, and guys, things are a mess. They are an absolute mess. A lot of it coming down, obviously, in the last couple hours. The biggest news, if anyone has been, living under a social media rock, hasn't been checking out Twitter, is we got 3 games that have moved. So the main slate has shrunk on down to 9 games. 1 moved off of Saturday to now Monday. So here's what we've got. On Monday, 5 o'clock Eastern time, it is the Raiders at the Browns. Of course, the other game that was already scheduled for Monday night, Vikings at the Bears. And then 2 games on Tuesday, fellas, that will go head-to-head with one another. And that is the Washington game at the Eagles, and then the more appealing to the eyes game of the Seahawks at the Rams, which leaves us with 1 game to talk about on Saturday night. That's the Patriots visiting Indianapolis. Is this, Bukes, we'll start with you. I mean, is this shifting how you are approaching anything from a betting perspective? Obviously, DFS is another story.
I mean, here we are, promoters of DraftKings. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say, well, don't bet anything because it's a disaster. But, I truly, you just got to be smart with this, right? I know that, sometimes you don't want to wait it out because you want to try to get the best line possible or whatnot. But, just look at, that Eagles and Washington game, right? A week ago, the Eagles opened up as minus 2.5 point favorites. Before it got rescheduled, it was almost 10.5 for the Eagles. The line movement that we've seen in some of these games, the Browns, they were favorites, 5.5 point favorites. Then they were 3.5 point dogs before everything got canceled. It's been absolutely insane. Some of these games where they haven't had any COVID issues so far, knock on wood. I'd probably be looking to be betting. I like the Bengals this week against the Broncos. They haven't had any issues, thankfully, so far. I think the Lions might be able to cover against the Cardinals. Maybe that's one I'll be taking a look at too as well. But some of these games, you just really can't even touch, and you got to just stay away from Patriots and Colts. It's another game where they really haven't had any issues. But yeah, it's just it's a mess out there. It's an absolute minefield. And for DFS purposes, good Lord, haven't even gotten to that yet. I don't even want to think about that yet.
Yeah, when it comes to lineup building and all that, and we can get into some of that a little bit later, but that's just a whole different thing. Anything that we tell you as it relates to daily fantasy and this football weekend, by no means lock it in today. Do not. I mean, this is a lock in right before kickoff kind of situation because, while I don't think LaMarca, any other games are going to move at this point, though it's still entirely possible. Obviously, COVID is running amok across the NFL. Games are getting postponed, and the NHL, NBA may not be far behind with all the players there entering health and safety protocols. There are a whole bunch just tonight that aren't available to the people. But COVID specifically, even if, like Buke said, you could look at it, look at the games, look at the lines, all that stuff. What we still don't know is, you could still have key players that are ruled out minutes before these games kick off. So is that altering the way you think about anything?
Yeah, I think Steve said it pretty well. I don't think it makes a huge difference whether these teams play on Sunday, on Monday, on Tuesday. They're professional athletes. They'll be ready. What matters is what players are on the field. Mm-hmm. So you got to stay on top of the news reports and, be prepared to adjust. Right. And sometimes you can get a situation where the lines over adjust. Steve mentioned that Browns game, moving from a 5.5 point favorite to a 3.5 point dog. I kind of think that might be a little too much respect for Baker Mayfield, right? Are we sure Baker Mayfield, with the way he's played recently, is worth 9 points of spread value over Nick Mullins? I'm not sure. So I may be willing to buy back in on the Browns at this current number.
Before we get ahead to the weekend, why don't we look back at what promised to be and delivered a really appealing Thursday night game between 2 really good teams, obviously teams that are battling back and forth in the AFC West right now. Bukes, you got Kansas City, now the new AFC leaders at the moment. They were already favorites to come out of the AFC in recent days, even before that game. Obviously, the Chiefs now 10-4 after outlasting the Chargers in overtime with that big touchdown pass, Mahomes to Kelsey. Both those guys, along with Tyreek Hill, they were all absolute monsters in that one. Is this now a point where, okay, Chiefs are who we thought they were, and that's been the case? They've won their last 7 games at this point, and nothing should really surprise us.
It's really not, right? Can you really come out of that game and say, yeah, the Chiefs, handled that game. They beat the Chargers handily. Like, no. If Staley wasn't a complete dope, like the Chiefs win that game and it never goes to OT. But I think the part that's being overlooked because everybody's talking about the Chargers coaching, Mahomes did not look good for the majority of that game. He was throwing some really crap throws throughout the game. How many times did you see a pass attempt from Patrick Mahomes like to Kelsey, and he's like trying to scoop it off the ground constantly? And that fourth down that the Chiefs win for to Pringle, I think it was. What a crap throw that was. Like, there was some really bad throws from Patrick Mahomes in that game. So I look at that game and I say, okay, whatever. You can say the Chargers handed them that game. Do you feel good about how the Chiefs played in that game? You can't. You can't say that the Chiefs played well in that game, especially Mahomes. He had some good throws to win them that game. That bomb to Kelsey was huge. And you saw some Patrick Mahomes there, but I think it's fair to say the majority of the throws that he had last night were awful. And going down now, we're getting into the clutch time. That's not what you want to see from your quarterback. I thought Mahomes looked awful last night.
LaMarca, I'll ask you, did you feel good about the Chiefs and Mahomes?
Yeah. Give me an awful 410-yard, 3-touchdown performance any day of the week. I'll take that from my quarterback. So to answer your original question, are the Chiefs, who we thought they were? The answer is no, because they're better than who we thought they were. Right? This team is playing defense. Now, they weren't great last night. They gave up 400 yards of total offense to the Chargers, but look at the defensive numbers for this team over the last 8 weeks. They're incredible. They've been winning games with their defense more than they have with their offense. And as Patrick Mahomes and their offense showed us last night, they can still dial it up and win a shootout when they need to. So I think this Chiefs team is very good. I said last week I thought the Bills were the best team in football still. I may be swinging back towards Kansas City just because they've shown some ability on the defensive side of the ball that I didn't really think that we would see from them.
KC right now, of course, Super Bowl favorites on the DK Sportsbook, plus 450. The Bucks right behind it, plus 500. So we are, on track if that were to hold, obviously, for a rematch from last year. We'll see. You got the Packers, the Patriots, the Cardinals, all in the top 5 as well. I was talking to Moose, Jeff Ulrich. He was with me on the Slate yesterday, and just sort of looking at the conference as a whole. And obviously, we'll get into this weekend's games. But, one in particular, tomorrow night, you got the Patriots taking on the Colts, two teams that are again contenders in the conference at this moment. He said that if he's looking for anyone to take longer odds on as opposed to one of the favorites, get a good number on the Colts, the Titans, those two in particular. Those are the teams that he really likes. LaMarca, are you in agreement with that, or is there another team in the AFC and the NFL in general that you really like?
I do think the Colts are better than their record, better than these odds indicate. I don't know if they're necessarily somebody that I would be looking at to win the title. If I was going to go down the board, I think I would be looking at the 49ers at plus 3,500, because playing them is just kind of different than playing most teams. You got to be ready for, a heavy dose of the running attack, which basically no other team in football plays that way at this point. So I know we haven't seen the best of the 49ers recently, but I think that they're good enough to get into the playoffs. And then once you get into the playoffs, I think this is a year when really anything can happen.
Well, especially with COVID, obviously, as we know, and it's not necessarily expected with the variants and whatnot to get any better as the winter moves along. So yeah, it's a giant unpredictable X factor here. But what about you, Bukes? Who are you looking at?
I've said this multiple times. So, but I look at the Cowboys at 12-1. Like, they're going to move up in the seeding before the season's over. They realistically can go 3-1 to end the year. Giants, Washington again, Cardinals, and Eagles. Like, is that not a 3-1 record for that team? Maybe even potentially 4-0 with how the Cardinals respond without Hopkins. There's a path to a much better seeding for the Cowboys than they are right now. So you're not going to get them at 12-1 anymore. This is probably your last shot at that. Those odds are just going to slide a little bit further. Like, for a team that has one of the easiest schedules to end the year, that's a playoff contender. Like, I can't get over the numbers at 12-1 for the Cowboys here. Basically the same as the Bills. And many people say the Bills are the team, the second best team in the AFC. Like, Okay, I'll take that for the Cowboys. India. I think the Cowboys is just you're getting really good value on that there at 12-1. I'm shocked it's still at that number.
We're here for about 25 more minutes. If anybody has any questions, get them in by all means. We'd love to help you out. Obviously, we see some of our friends in the chat, CEH among them, and looking ahead to tomorrow night, guys, because that's just the next game we have to work with, and it's a pretty good one, obviously. Patriots in Indianapolis. I mentioned the Pats. They've won their last 7. They were the AFC leaders before, obviously, the Chiefs have leapfrogged them into that position. Pats can reclaim that, obviously, with a victory, but they are dogs. They are 2-point underdogs in Indianapolis, Buke. So deservedly so. This was the case even before Damian Harris was ruled out and that, lifted Ramondre Stevenson. How are you feeling about this game?
Yeah, look, I mean, all the money's on the Patriots here. 70% of the handle is on +2.5. This has moved down to +2 now for the Patriots. 69% of the handle on them on the money line, which was at 120 when I got these numbers. Now it's at 115. Honestly, the Patriots kind of feel like the sucker play because that's where all the money is. But the way I kind of envision this game playing out is that the Patriots are going to let Jonathan Taylor run against them, try to avoid those big chunk plays, and have Carson Wentz try to beat them. And now Carson Wentz, who is someone who's been under pressure on almost 38% of his dropbacks, he's completing less than half of his pass attempts in that scenario, going up against a very good defense. So look, everything says that, this is a spot where the Patriots might be able to overcome being underdogs here, but the Colts are tricky, man. Like, you have to give them some credit. Like, I one of my biggest bets of the year was making them to not make the playoffs because right when the Carson Wentz news came out, laid a fat one on that to not make the playoffs, and then he ended up playing on week 1. So, screw me. But whatever. Needless to say, though, but like they've been one of the better teams, one of the more surprising teams in that conference. It wasn't for the hot start that the Titans got off to. The Colts could have had a stranglehold on this on this division. So I still like the Patriots. I have them teased up to 8.5. That was one of my favorite teaser legs on this board before everything went haywire. But it's like non-homerism aside, and I know we're talking to Adam Kaufman, so it's hard to think about.
I think I've been very well behaved today.
You have,
Thank you.
But I might have just let the cat out of the bag. I do like the Patriots here. I do think that they can overcome this one.
LaMarca, who's taking this one?
I don't have a great feel for this. I would say that the Patriots are the better team here. But when you adjust the line for home field, I think that this is about where I would have it. This is a show me game for me, for the Patriots, right? I know it's hard to say that about a team that's won 7 straight games, but there's a lot of, fluky games in there. There's a lot of bad teams in there. Like their best win, they did beat the Bills in a game where their quarterback threw 3 passes. Like it's been a weird run, right? And this Colts team is healthy-ish.
Yeah.
Like this is a real test. So my theory has been that this Patriots team is overvalued, but I'm tired of losing money by betting against them. So I'm just going to stay away from it, I think. But if I was forced to pick a side, I would take the Colts.
Do you expect that kind of what Bukes was just talking about? We're not going to sit here and delve deep into DFS as it relates to this game because we have plenty to get to. But do you think Jonathan Taylor goes off tomorrow night, or at least the Patriots, sort of put him in position to go off?
I don't know why anyone would make that their game plan. Like, you know what? Let's let Jonathan Taylor just do that, and we'll try and really stop the passing attack. Like, no, Jonathan Taylor is priority 1 when you're facing the Colts. So the Patriots defense, they're great against the run. They're great against the pass. I think that this is a spot where Taylor struggles a little bit, but does that mean he has a bad fantasy day? No, like he's going to get his 20 plus touches. He'll probably score a touchdown because he does every single week. Seriously, I drafted that guy in one league and he is just carrying my team. Love you, JT.
No, he's been incredible, no doubt about it. One thing that I think is interesting, guys, going to looking at the rest of the weekend and week, because again we get 2 games Monday, 2 games Tuesday, is last night I don't remember where the where the line actually closed going into the game, but it was in the neighborhood of 54.5 points, point total, something like that, between the Chiefs and the Chargers. And obviously they, obliterated that thing. You look ahead to what we have in front of us here, and obviously you have some sizable spreads. You get some real big favorites here this weekend, but you don't have any point totals that even hit 50 points. A lot of it's in the mid 40s. Is there a game here, Bukes, that you think is going to break out?
I think the Falcons 49ers game has a real shot of going over 46 points. I mean, like you mentioned, there's not a lot of huge totals on the board, but quite frankly, sportsbooks have been annihilated by unders this season. Unders have been hitting at such a ridiculous rate that, at some point, the adjustment has to happen. Maybe this is a week because there's obviously so many issues and injuries that you're dealing with, but yeah, it's not a lot of high totals, but I think the Falcons and 49ers has a legit chance. 49ers really banged up in that secondary. The Falcons, giving up just a ton of points. 49ers have scored 30 plus points in 3 of their last 5 games. It doesn't feel like this offense is like a juggernaut or anything like that, but the numbers say different, which is amazing when you have, Jimmy Garoppolo under center, because I don't think he's a great quarterback, right? But George Kittle and Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk have been carrying it for this team. So against this Falcons team that just, can't stop the run, can't stop the pass. I think that they both teams can do enough to get this over. So I do like over 46, and that's actually one of the higher totals on the slate.
LaMarca, is there a game you've got your eye on?
Not a game, but a team. The Miami Dolphins.
Yes.
I've been riding the Dolphins' coattails for the better part of a month now, but this Jets team is just, it might be the worst defensive team I've seen, right? Like, just since their bye week, they've allowed 54, 31, 45, 45, 24, 14 against the Texans. Great showing there by the Jets defense. 33 and 30 points. They have held 2 teams in the last 8 weeks under 30. And the total on this game is 41 points. The only problem is I don't know if the Jets can score 2 touchdowns against this Dolphins defense. So I might rather just look at the Dolphins implied team, or, their team total, take the over on that. But the Jets have been one of the few teams in football this season who have been an over team. And it's because their defense is just an absolute sieve.
And real quick, just for daily fantasy, pairing Tua and Devontae Parker, because there's no Waddle, is so ridiculously cheap that by the time Sunday rolls around, the ownership is going to be on there. But both guys are just so mispriced. Tua is 5,700, I think it is, and Devontae Parker, I think, is 4,300. Parker at 4,300, and now moving into the wide receiver 1 role. That is just such a ridiculously cheap stack. It's almost unfortunate that there's so many injuries this week, because you'd love to be able to use all this salary that you're saving to pay up for other guys, but nobody's playing because everybody's hurt or sick. So it's such an awful timing for this, but 4,300 for Parker, who's going to be the wide receiver 1. I mean, give me a break against this team. I don't care if they're almost a double-digit favorites. They'll get enough going because they're so banged up in the backfield. I know they activated 2 guys off the list. I think it's Ahmed and Gaskin, I think, is the one that are back, but still, this is just way too cheap for a connection that should be at least busy in the first half.
I'm just looking at it, and as maybe people can see, we've got this $3.25 million fantasy football millionaire contest, $1 million to first place, plus the Tournament of Champions entry as well. And ownership projections, again, a lot can change. COVID can change a ton between now and Sunday, certainly. But where things stand right now as we talk, Devontae Parker is projected to be the highest owned player on the main slate, right around 24-25%.
Yep, that makes sense.
I think I'm more inclined to target the running back situation. I think Gaskin, it's been a couple of poor showings here for Gaskin recently, but he's involved in the passing game. He's getting plenty of carries. And again, the Jets, they've been bad in general, but they have been really bad against the run. So I think Gaskin at his price tag is a nice option. I don't expect him to carry nearly the same ownership as Parker. So that would be the way I would approach it for tournaments.
Yeah, he's around 12% right now.
Who's that?
Gaskin.
Oh, okay.
Sticking with running backs, by the way, and obviously there's been a lot of conversation around this guy, especially since the dismissal Urban Meyer, and that is, of course, James Robinson. He's projected to be owned right around 20% of lineups. This guy is, he's cheap. He's $5,400. He did nothing last week because he got benched. He didn't even have a single fantasy point. I think it was like half a point, something like that. And now most expect him to just absolutely go off. Bukes, is he your favorite running back on the slate? Is he? I mean, he's got to be up there, I'm sure. But where does he fit for you?
Well, the thing about this week at running back too is like the running back position is just an absolute wasteland, right? Like there's like nobody that stands out that's like a must play other than Robinson. The only problem that I have here is that, do I want to trust James Robinson on a, this is what everybody thinks should happen, rather than this is what is actually going to happen, right? Like are they actually going to let the chains off and let Robinson do what he's going to do? Most likely, because I think that's what the team wants, and talking about the players, but is that going to actually equate to production? Now, he's in an absolute mess of a game against the Houston Texans, who are another team who just really can't defend at any rate, but the ownership is going to be so high on Robinson, even more so with 3 of these games off the slate now, that it's like, at what point is it not worth playing Robinson anymore? Like, we may have gotten to that point. If he gives you 15, 16, 17, fantasy points, you're going to be happy with that? Not really at this rate with how much the ownership is going to be there. So now it's more of, where can we pivot off to somebody else that could have the same type of production, or maybe can do something else? Like maybe it's, someone like Melvin Gordon, maybe in that same range. For everyone that's knocking on Melvin Gordon, like I get like Javonte Williams does look great. Melvin Gordon in the split role has been pretty fantastic lately. I think he's averaging almost 5 yards per carry over his last 4 or 5 games. Like he's been more than serviceable, and the ownership has always just been, a quarter of some of these other chalky plays. So, maybe Gordon's a nice pivot against the Bengals if you think that the Broncos are going to win this game. So Robinson's going to be so popular now that I almost thinking that pivoting off of him is going to be the play this week.
Just sort of looking at some of the other options that are in the, either similar price range or cheaper, obviously, because what brings me back, I don't know about you, LaMarca, what brings me back to Robinson is, I mean, yes, he's going to be popular, and Bukes asked, like, if he gave you 16, 17, 18 points, would you be happy with that? I would be, just because he's so cheap, just because he's only at $5,400. I'm not necessarily looking to pivot off of him to unless there's someone I think is in a great spot who's just a lot cheaper. Like I'm looking here.
There's
like,
not.
I don't know,
That's the problem. There isn't.
David Johnson.
It's tough,
like, how are you going to feel
to find any running back that you really want to play? That's why I'm so intrigued by Gaskin. But I do think that in fantasy, in DFS, if there's a position to eat the chalk at, it's running back, just because it's so volume dependent. Yeah. And we're pretty good at predicting who's going to get the touches. I think Jacksonville, like, this is a big dead coach bounce spot for them, with no Urban. So I'm going to eat some Jimmy Rob chalk. Maybe I won't have him as quite as many of my lineups as the field will. The guy that I'm really bummed about is I was all excited to play Elijah Mitchell, because that guy never gets as much ownership as he deserves, but he's been ruled out. So there goes that. And I think the guy that I'm looking at now that is like going to be undervalued, in my opinion, is James Conner. He's questionable. Yes. They are expected to have Chase Edmonds back in the lineup. So maybe Connor receives a few less carries, a bit less work in the passing game, but it's a smash spot against Detroit. They're big favorites. The guy who is going to be the between the tackles grinder, who's going to run the clock out, is going to be James Conner. So I think that 6,400 for him is a great price tag. And if for some reason they ease Edmonds into the rotation, then that's great for Connor as well. So I like him as a contrarian play.
8 touchdowns his last 5 games. He is
guys back, man. Beast. Just goes to show how stupid the running back position is, right? Pittsburgh just couldn't wait to get this guy out the door. They bring in a rookie first rounder, and now he's great. Fine,
he has been great.
He has not been great. He's been good for fantasy because he gets like 30 touches a game. Yeah, but it's not like he has rejuvenated their rushing attack.
No, but he's been great for fantasy. That context. The one thing that's sort of sends everything on its ear here this weekend, Bukes, is, and a popular play, obviously, was going to be very highly owned and still will be in, his respective slate at this point. But since Cooper Kupp is no longer available to people, which has been such a, he's been such a free square throughout this season, obviously, he's not going to be in all the whatever 30+% ownership that he was probably going to have this weekend now that he's no longer on the main slate. What kind of wrinkle does that put in the wide receiver position for people looking for some of that differentiation now?
I don't want to say that it's not a huge factor, but like when you say that, a 9K guy is not going to be on the slate anymore, like I feel like there's only if you're building with Kupp in there, you're building with that in mind. So then you're going down at other positions. But the problem is like there's so many guys that like it's not worth paying up for that. I don't feel like it's going to change too drastically. Like, where does that, like, when you say like Devontae Parker was going to be the most popular option, like he's one of the cheaper options. So it's not like this ownership from Kupp is going down to Parker. Like maybe that shifts now to Devontae Adams, right? Against the Orioles, or maybe that brings more to, Devo Samuel. Did I say Orioles? Baseball on my mind, man. 24/7. Love baseball.
Diggs. That's another one too.
So like it's just going to trickle down to some of those guys who are in that same range anyway. So I don't think it's, from a fantasy perspective, yes, like one of the highest scoring players is off. But when it comes to ownership, it's just going to really go to that same range. So it's not going to make too much of a difference, in my opinion.
What about if LaMarca people are looking for, again, like maybe you're more inclined now to pay up at other positions because you don't have to at receiver necessarily. You could go to Adams by all means. I mean, how much is he coming in at this weekend? 8,900. So obviously same basic, same price, but I mean, I don't know, like with DeAndre Hopkins out now, like Christian Kirk is going to get a boost. Obviously the ownership is going to be higher for him. AJ Green's going to get some attention as well. Rondale Moore, but Kirk in particular is this, do you find yourself inclined to look at Arizona at all in this situation?
Yeah, sure. I'll have some exposure to some of the cheap guys, but I think what this slate and the absence of Kupp is really going to do is it's going to result in big ownership for George Kittle. Like we have not seen players pay up at tight end a lot this season. Most weeks the tight ends check in with relatively low ownership. Kittle the past 4 weeks has been 6.8, 7.2, 5.1, and 7.9% ownership.
Wow.
I would say he's over 20 this week comfortably, especially again with Eli Mitchell out of the lineup. It's not hard to pair Devontae Adams and George Kittle because there are 0 running backs to pay up for, right? Your most expensive running back is Najee Harris, and he's 7,800. So given the cheap wide receivers that you can look at, you've got Gabe Davis at 3,700, who's looking like a huge part of the Bills offense again. You mentioned Devontae Parker. You've got the Cardinals guys. Like, I just think it's very easy this week to go sort of stars and scrubsy with Kittle and with Devontae Adams against the Ravens team that has 0 cornerbacks left on their roster.
About 80 fantasy points his last 2 outings. Bukes, you feeling the same about Kittle this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, it would not shock me, like Marcus said, that goes to over 20%. And that's a great point, too. I didn't even think about Kittle. That's where I think a lot of that's going to go to. I think Kittle's going to be a really popular option here against the Falcons team that just, like I said, struggles against anything that is thrown in the air against them. They just can't defend against that at all. So with the work that Kittle has been doing, too, like you just mentioned, like the fantasy points he's put out is just absolutely absurd. Was it 26, 27 targets over his last 2 games? Like that's just crazy.
27.
So,
with
27
with 22 catches.
Yeah.
Right. Because the team has essentially now just moved Deebo Samuel to like the running
back. Yeah. Yep.
So George Kittle is their primary pass catcher. It's weird.
Yep, for sure.
We've got about 5 minutes left. Anybody has any questions, by all means, get them in, obviously, before we get out of here. But Bukes, any key plays, DFS in particular, or if there's a bet you really like on the sports book that we haven't talked about yet for this weekend?
If you want to go jump back over on the sports book,
where do you want to look?
I love doing the 6-point teasers. I love doing those. I like taking the Patriots to +8 and then getting the Bengals up to +9, getting up through some of those key numbers there. And like, I think both teams could quite frankly win outright, but obviously getting the more appealing numbers in these games too. I just think these are two teams that don't deserve to be underdogs, despite, them both being on the road. And we know how much these away teams have succeeded in these spots. So that would probably be my favorite bet here. Some of the lines that have moved too, you can get some of these teams at appealing numbers too. Like you can get the Cardinals down to -6.5, get the Bills down to -6, get them under those touchdown marks. So this has turned into an appealing teaser week, even though it wasn't to begin, but it just goes to show how drastically some of these lines have moved around.
What about for you, LaMarca?
I'm going with the square special. I'm taking the Jacksonville Jaguars -5 points.
Wow.
I really do.
You want the bounce back, huh? From
them getting rid of Urban. It's just going to be like, oh, thank you for this Christmas gift that you have bestowed upon me and my family. Plus, I'm always happy to fade Davis Mills. Surprisingly good game from Mills last week. My best ball teams thank him, but the guy stinks. He's not good. Like Trevor Lawrence, this is a big game for him. Hopefully he can maybe throw a touchdown pass. I don't know. Well, let's get weird, right? I'm going with the Jaguars. Give me Jacksonville -5.
Are you guys
5 is just such an ugly number though, right?
It's a weird
one. It's a weird number. That's the only thing I hate is that 5 is just such a gross number. That's my only mention on that.
Are you guys going to be going near that Browns game at all on Tuesday or Monday? When is that one? Monday, right? With all the Monday at 5. With all the just everything going on from a COVID standpoint, is it a wait and see or is it just an auto fade for you? You just put your money elsewhere.
I was so happy with my Raiders +145 that it got voided. I feel like it's too dirty now. Now I can't get into it. I was so thrilled. Once the Baker News comment came out, I got that before everything went down. I was thrilled. I'm like, oh, here's going to be an easy win. And then they postpone it and it gets voided. But I want nothing to do with that game. I don't think it's come back up on the sports. Well, yeah, it hasn't. I'd be surprised to see what it looks like. But like, I honestly don't even understand the protocols at this point. So I can't even say myself that I know who's going to be playing and I know who's don't. And I don't think the league does either. So I'm not going to bet on a game where I don't even know who's taking the field at this point. When I bet it was, Baker was out. There was a number of Browns players out. Cool. They're not playing. I'm taking it. I don't know anymore. So I'm just staying far away from that game.
Got a minute or two left here. I just want to mix this in, LaMarca. Obviously, some the basketball has just been a circus in recent days. We got
you think the NBA COVID is wild? Hop over to the association.
Yeah. The NHL. At least the NHL is even postponing games too. I mean, that's a whole other level. Then you got like canceled to postponed, delayed a couple of days in the part of the NFL, obviously, and NBA. They're just playing through it right now. That's what Adam Silver's trying to guide them to do. Kyrie Irving, this is not relevant to tonight, but bigger news is that he and the Nets, they've worked something out, and looks like the Nets ultimately have decided they're okay with having a part-time player, and Kyrie Irving is, don't know where he stands on the vaccination front, but looks as though he is primed to play road games. That appears to be in the Nets' future. Kevin Durant, one of the latest to be sent into health and safety protocols. But as it relates to tonight's slate, we've got 8 games as things stand here right now, LaMarca. There are some key guys that are out, injury or health and safety protocols, whatever it may be. Who are you targeting tonight? Give some advice to the people.
Well, first off, I don't know who the hell is going to play for the Orlando Magic. They have literally 11 guys ruled out. So I guess a little Chuma Okeke, perhaps.
Yeah, look at this. I don't know if we're showing this or not, but
yeah,
get this up
goodness.
On the screen share for everybody. I mean, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. There's only one guy above, three guys above 3,200 that are even available.
Right. And Gary Harris is still questionable, by the way. So there could be one more ruled out. Then you head over to Sacramento. I think that this game between the Kings and the Grizzlies could also be extremely valuable. But Sacramento, another team, they have 1 million players ruled out. They have 2 more questionable. So it's one of those slates where there's going to be a ton of value options to choose from, which then means you can pay up for whatever studs you may be interested in. I'm always interested in Nikola Jokic. He's up to 12,000. I don't care. At least 61.5 DraftKings points in 6 straight games. So I'll pay up for the big fella. But yeah, it's going to be a weird night.
Yeah, very strange. Should be interesting anyway. Hopefully it'll be fun for the people. Some just based on projections, just looking real quick and then we'll get out of here. But some better plays, obviously Jokic, Anthony Davis in a good spot, Kyle Lowry, Wendell Carter Jr. for Orlando, who obviously LaMarca, was talking about that game. So as far as some of the, and Carter's not even a pay up, but some of the pseudo pay up options, it's going to be a different kind of night in the association. But we thank you all for being here with us. I guess if there's any good news, guys, not that, COVID postponements are ever good, but I saw somebody, maybe it was Field Yates, tweet earlier that now we've got football like 8 nights in a span of 10 days. So that's exciting. That's something to look forward to for all of us and keep us all busy and playing your showdowns and everything like that. Have a good weekend. Holidays are right around the corner. We thank LaMarca and Bukes, obviously, Eamon, our producer, T Pike, undercover boss Tom, our technical director. I am Adam Kaufman. We appreciate you hanging out, and good luck tonight. Keep an eye on everything right up until lock. We'll see you.